As many of us know, the concept of artificial intelligence stems at least as far back as Alan Turing's work, who was an English mathematician, computer scientist, and cryptanalyst of the 1940s. But here in 2024, there are now multiple versions, nuances, and iterations of what comprises, quote unquote, AI. Many well-known artists, such as Katy Perry, Scarlett Johansson, Billie Eilish, and far more, have attempted to push back against what amounts to little more than algorithmic plagiarism and other nefarious digital chicanery. Companies such as OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google have cooked up intrusive applications such as ChatGPT, Midjourney, Claude, Bing, and so forth. But these computer programs are trained with data which does not belong to them in any way, shape, nor form. By doing so, they've created a bloody global debacle, a digital pandemic, if you will, one that affects nearly everyone on the planet, and not simply and merely, quote unquote, artists. And speaking of artists, I was recently approached about the artificial intelligence debacle by a young student named Harvey G., who is based in England. He was intent on chatting with various artists and creators regarding the entire AI situation. The following video covers our discussion. So, if you're looking for some enlightenment on how artificial intelligence, or is that digital jankery and chicanery, affects absolutely everything and everyone, I encourage you to listen and watch. If not, well, then you can simply look forward to the launch of my fourth book over 2024's winter solstice, or you can visit the Diamond Dragons website for information on the previous 3 in the series. Enjoy, thanks for watching, and, as my characters often state, Chi-Yong, Chi-Foi, Vas Res, and Eyayeli-ha.
So yeah, perfect. So as you were saying, yeah, can you just talk about what you were doing, sorry, during lockdown?
Well, I was releasing my own books at the time,
Yeah,
that's what you see behind me.
yeah,
And so I was trying to reach out to different artists of different walks of life to find out how they felt about not only the pandemic, but what was going on because of the pandemic's effect on the industry, like production, right? Do
okay.
you understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of hard to explain now to some people because they'll think, 4 years later, a lot of people are like, who cares and what difference did it really make? I'm like, well, it was pretty significant. You
Yeah,
know, it
it's
changed
definitely
a
had
lot
a
of
knock-on effects, yeah.
rules and regulations
Mm.
and just people's thoughts on things, and it destroyed lots of jobs and all that kind of stuff like that. But as you said, now we have we have a different pandemic destroying art in certain ways. So I suppose that's what you're wanted to ask about.
Yeah, and did any of those discussions during COVID, they were more centered about the pandemic? You didn't talk at all, or did you talk a little bit about AI during those times? Because,
It's a really good point. Yeah, no one was talking about it. And to give you at least some background, at least with me, is I do have some experience and some training and learning on the concept of artificial intelligence in general. I won't go into all the details about that, but I think it's important for people, and you can put this in your work as well, is that there's a huge and distinct difference between artificial intelligence and then algorithmic piracy, right? And plagiarism. There's just they're just two completely different fruits, maybe in the same kingdom, if you will, but certainly not the same thing. Just like the fact that no one would consider using, okay, like let's say we took a picture of you, Harvey, right? And then we're like, oh,
yeah,
we're going to put this in a paper. Well, we need to have digital touch up artists go and work on it. No one would probably say, aha, Harvey is using, digital algorithms to, destroy artwork and everything. It'd be like it's just a touch up. But it's arguable that some people could say, well, in a way, isn't that using algorithmic techniques to alter and morph things? Even people could say CGI is the same thing. Like, obviously with his explosion next to Jackie Chan, back in the day, he did it for real for the most part.
yeah.
But then later on, as the 80s and 90s kind of, have now disappeared into the past. It's not uncommon for even the most basic scene in a film two actors could just be standing there talking, and the background, even though it's not boom and explosion and arrows flying and rockets, it's just maybe a church and a sky and clouds, and they're like, we're gonna Photoshop that all in later. You guys can come into the studio. You're gonna sit on the thing, and there's a green screen. You guys don't need to be outside. We can control the lighting, and there you go. So it's very interesting when people bring up now the well, first of all, just the letters AI. I don't think everybody is talking about it in in the same way that they think they mean it.
Okay. And then so you have those two camps that you were talking about, this algorithmic piracy
Right.
and artificial intelligence. So how do those two compare, and where does something like when these artists are talking about, using their songs as training data to, feed an algorithm, what does that fall into? Which camp?
Well, from my perspective, and you have to remember and understand, Harvey, and this would be something that you'd want to possibly include in your work, is that I am just one artist and I don't carry any particular meaning when there's 8 billion people on the planet. I wouldn't even carry any particular meaning even if I was a superstar, like if I were Tom Cruise or Harrison Ford or
Yeah, no, I agree.
Gwyneth Paltrow for that matter, right? It doesn't matter if even if those things, because I'm still one of 8 billion. And
No, sure.
arguably, someone might say, well, you're not even an AI expert. Who the hell do you think you are? And all that stuff. But I'm like, I think it's important for people to really recognize that difference between when this chat GPT thing was introduced into our society. It wasn't really limited to, okay, here's Harvey with his laptop and he's going to code a video game. And people will be like, what's the big deal with that? And I'm like, nothing. He's just coding it. It's within his own hard drive and his own constraints. And sure, he might draw from some dynamically linked libraries and other DLLs or whatever, but it's pretty much its own world. ChatGPT, pretty much, as far as I have been educated on, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, is ChatGPT is educated on pretty much the aggregate content that mankind itself has ever created. Now, arguably, some would say, oh, come on, not everything is in there. I'm like, okay, probably not everything, but when you feed it the entire archive and volumes of Shakespeare, of Keats, of Balzac, of, I mean, Rostand, of Edward Zwick, who's a filmmaker. I mean, just, you probably understand what I mean is it's
Yeah.
totally, completely unfathomable. You could sit there and go through the lists I think they now have to publicly do that now too. I'm not really sure because of the lawsuits that are beginning. There's lists now to find out if your name and or meaning your content has been, whatever you want to call it, scraped, scanned, taken, looked at, whatever. And as you can imagine, it's not like a list of 1,000 individuals. It's not a list of 1,000 individuals who are dead. It's not even a list of 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million. This is uh, it's a throng of content. It's a horde, legions of information uh, located in this one engine. And again, it'd be one thing if someone said, "Well, fortunately for mankind, CGPT is the only thing out there," and I'd be like, unfortunately, there is Claude, Bard, Bing, this, that, the other. Blah, 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 blah. It's just there's no. It's not like, oh well, we made sure to crack it down and limit it. And beyond that, Harvey, not to keep going on, but I have a lot to say about this. Is
It's okay.
what
It's good.
about thieves? Right? What about the quote unquote the bad guys? You know, if we want to make it very black on white on who is evil and who is good guys. Not that the world ever works that way, but my point being is if I own a gun, I might be using it for protection because of maybe I'm ethical. But if we have a gun, then we can also have a gun that's used for destruction and chaos and murder and stealing or whatever. So I look at it like mankind has now created a universally all-encompassing weapon, a global weapon that stretches out like it were veins crossing all over the earth, electronic ones, if you will, digital ones, if you will, and it can be used in any way that anyone wants. I mean, you're not limited either. You can steal as much as you like right now, Harvey. There's no rules as far as I know. There's no laws, there's no regulations, and even if there were, there's none of them global. So you might be like, uh-oh, they made a law against using Chat GPT to do blah, 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 blah in Mexico. I'll just move to England. Or, uh-oh, this one covers Mexico, England, the United States, and Great Britain. I'll just move to Australia and I'll continue to do my work or whatever it is. So it's extremely complicated, and I think that Carl Sagan's warnings, a person who you can either look up or maybe you already know who this is, they were not heeded. His warnings about technology growing at a geometric rate and totally surpassing the way that we as human beings are limited by our own brains is just ludicrous. It's terrifying in a lot of ways. I understand that some people are excited and that ChatGPT and algorithmic complexity can do us good, but it's also one of those things where it's like, not to use another analogy with this recent Oppenheimer movie that I forgot the director's name off the top of my head. Was it Christopher Nolan? I
Nolan, yeah,
think so.
Christopher Nolan, yeah.
And I knew about this J. Robert Oppenheimer for a long time, for decades. I mean, hopefully many people did. But it's like, you make this thing, and just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And the other sad point of that is you're like, well, if I don't make it, what if somebody else does? And what if they're not me? And what if they're not ethical? And so on. So I don't know what else to say other than those things. I hope that's uh, I mean, that's a lot of information I just
No, yeah,
flung to you.
that's really well put. Thank you, yeah, that's really well put. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of things that I want to ask. But I guess I'll start with okay, so let's go back to you.
Mhm.
Can you just explain to me a little bit more about what you do kind of as a writer and what your background is in the creative sort of field?
Sure, I'll try to keep it short too, because again, I would prefer to, like when you end up working with this content and however you want to do it, or even if you want to one day release the video, I don't see why not. Um, you know, we all live on this rock, and it's twirling around in helical spires around this gigantic fireball. And so we're all humans, but now we have this. We have this algorithmic juggernaut, just global, and it's huge. So it's much larger than any one of us. But my background is about 30 years, 30 plus years really in production. And what I mean by that is things like acting, directing, sound design. I designed over 9,000 sounds, and it's over 9,000. But that's one thing. Video editing, which people can see on my
Yeah.
channel. I used to design electronic props, which were mostly in the form of LED lightsaber props for Star Wars style productions, which I also choreographed these fight scenes suited up as Jedi and Darth Vader and Kylo Ren, all those things, and performed live in front of, well, live audiences and whatnot. I taught all sorts of workshops. I spent many years as a saber fencer and an instructor, so I have my share of golds and silvers and bronzes. Nothing Olympic or anything like that, but like, I trained as an athlete and performed and instructed both youth and adults. So there's a lot that I bring to the table in the sense that I am not simply an author, just of my book series, which
Yeah.
is called Diamond Dragons.
Mm.
But I sort of at least have that kind of overall perspective of not being limited to being like, hey, I'm just a writer, I don't do anything else, and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. It's like, well, I've kind of done almost all of the aspects of storytelling. And in addition to that, um, these other kind of interesting facets, like again, sound design. It's not really common to meet an author who is also a sound designer. I don't think. I've never met one yet. And it's very rare for me to find an author who was also an actor, although that does happen, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah,
So
no,
there you go. That gives you
that's
at
yeah.
least some background. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great, like a, as you say, massive wealth of experience that and now it's brought you to writing, which is kind of what I want to get onto as well. Has have these sort of examples of these AI models kind of influenced your style of writing because you fear that the the landscape has now shifted in that people
Mhm.
want a different kind of content, and it's actually changed how you were going to write originally. And obviously there's lawsuits where the New York Times are suing OpenAI because they've stolen from their massive archive of articles. I mean, do you fear that, your content could get stolen or has been stolen before? And, again, has it changed
Yeah,
your.
those are really good questions. So first of all, I work the way that I work, and I will always work that way, and that's regardless of how computer code comes out, which is I do everything myself. And when I say everything, pardon my French, I bleeping mean everything. I do all my writing, I do all of my editing, and that means all types of editing. And when it comes to editing, there's things like we could break it down into developmental editing, copy editing, line editing, proofreading. Those are the basic four. Arguably, someone else could say, oh, well, what about comprehensive or whatever? That's fine, but the point is, I do dev, line, copy, proof myself.
Mm,
I also format all of my own work. So the way that the books appear, at least in the physical formats, because I don't really control the digital ones, obviously, when you turn your phone or your device a certain way for the digital versions, they propagate in their own ways, and you can even use your own fonts. So I have no control over those to a certain extent. But I also do a lot of my illustrations, nearly all of them, about 90%. And for the ones I don't do, I hire artists, pay them. They know who I am. We work,
yeah.
like one on one. It's not like some anonymous thing. And I,
Mm,
ask them, hey, I have this thing. I want you to draw this one dragon, and they're in this particular. I'll give you all these details. It's a lot of fun for me too. Like, Harvey, the most fun about doing all the productions I've done over these 30 years is working with people, with good people. Okay? And it's true. Sometimes I've met some people who were not so great. They would fake me out. I would put a deposit, then they'd push deadline, and eventually I'd be like, you know what, you're fired. I don't know what the hell you think you're doing, but this is ridiculous. And you could tell later on, oh, they were just trying to string you along. That does happen. And maybe arguably someone could say, well, that won't happen with an algorithm. If you punch in some keys, it's just going to give you what you want, and there you go, and da da da. I'm like, that's true. But at least for me, I'm appealing to humanity and trying to say, I want to meet good artists, and I want to meet trustworthy artists and ethical ones, so that we can all work in that ethical way and produce something that is uh, timeless. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my work, is make something that once I'm gone, Harvey, which it won't be that long, actually, not as long as most people would like to think, is I would like it to last 30, 60, 120 years, if possible.
mm,
Um, so anyway, getting back to that, like, how does the AI affect me? I try not to think about it when I'm doing my thing. I am just storytelling. I'm trying to imbue creativity that comes from me, and I really don't use any uh, I don't want to say electronic tools, because obviously to edit my photos or to even write, my work and format it, you use software, obviously. But I don't even use Grammarly or grammar check things that go within the software. The only thing that it does is underline when a word is spelled wrong, and also, I have to teach it words because this book series, I have a whole bunch of, new names of characters that don't make any sense to it, new words from a new language that don't make any sense. So I teach it those things simply by saying this is now considered a word to be spelled correctly. So, yeah. But as to the like lawsuits and all the things that are going on with the rich versus the rich, um, I hope that goes well. And I hope that collectively global artists around, well, the globe, um, work together and sort of rise together and sort of communicate together to achieve at least, like, I don't know, six kind of unique but succinct and similar goals. Because if we don't, and everybody's just complaining about it as individuals, nothing will ever get done about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have to hope that the people who are in control of the algorithms, who are, let's just be honest, they're super wealthy, super connected, all this kind of stuff, and they have a great amount of people on their sides. We have to sort of work to get everybody to see the light with it. And I don't want to make that sound cliche, but it kind of is. It's like, is this what you really want? Do you really want it where your content eventually is poisoned by, like we already know when we use now the term hallucinations with chat GPT and all this stuff, this word now means something totally new. You know, we used to, it's funny how we used to think that the term hallucinations was only limited to humans. And now people talk about it, they're like, ChatGPT, what is 2 plus 2? And it's like, 2 plus 2 is 7. And the reason for this is, and it'll go on and it'll have all this information about why 2 plus 2 is 7. And you'll be like, what the hell is going on? Is that real? Is it joking with me? Wait, this can't be real. And then you'll find that you can literally ask it questions about history and it will give you the wrong answer. Not purposely, not with malice of intent. It's not sentient. But the irony that it tries to defend its point, even when it's wrong, is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It reminds me of some people where they have such cognitive dissonance that they'll argue a point that they don't know anything about, even to the point where it'll be absolutely apparent that they're wrong, and they'll just keep going. It reminds me of flat earthers, Harvey. You bring up Aristophanes, who's a Greek mathematician and scientist, and they'll be like, who's Aristophanes? Sounds like you're playing too many video games. I'm like, no, you idiot. He calculated the actual, it's not worth going into, but you know, people can look him up. You know, summer solstice, he
Yeah.
calculated the sunbeam into a well, used the curvature of the distance between city X and city Y, and he was like, well, with basic math, I mean, he didn't do anything super hyper crazy like wild. He just used, you know, basic math. And the irony to this is, again, going back to Chat GPT and these other engines, is if they can spit out information that's incorrect, what happens, Harvey? What happens when globally people are like, um, I don't want to say they're distorting history, but they're learning information, quote unquote, from computer code. That's wrong. What do you do when like a million people believe that Aristophanes didn't exist? What do you do? It's a million people. They
Yeah.
all believe it. What do you do with that? At a certain point, maybe someone standing next to 100 of those people will be like, well, they must all be right. I mean, I don't want to be the only person who's an idiot. I mean, 100 people told me that the earth is flat. I mean, who am I to say that it ain't flat? It's 100 people, right? Like, think about it, right, Harvey? If I told you, Harvey, if I said, hey, X is this way, and you knew it was wrong, but then like 100 people you knew told you exactly what I had just told you, which you know is a lie or you know it to be wrong, you'd probably start to think that maybe I'm the idiot, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Must give us pause.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely that whole aspect about educating people with these AI models, and it won't always, be entirely accurate. But if we go back to like, fictional writing and art, there's this whole scene where, there's no wrong answer really to that. And these models are kind of just churning out content that they've kind of like reshuffled, that's obviously scraped data from a lot of different artists. So do you think that there needs to be legislation in order to protect these artists, whose data is basically being stolen and
I
repurposed?
think I've thought about this quite a bit over the last year or so. I think it also relates to space in some ways, and let me explain. Is that I think there needs to be a global committee and or organization and or force, if you will. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter the wording. Who cares, right? Who cares what we call it? But I think representatives from every country need to be involved
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. And these kind of global committees need to be setting in laws that are global, You know, they are not like limited to the United States or limited to Russia or limited to Kazakhstan or something like that.
Yeah.
Granted, I think it will be really difficult in the beginning phases to say, okay, we're going to apply those, because some people will still be thinking as if it were the 1940s and 50s, where you didn't have this electronic global network of communication. But I mean, I hate to be crass about it, but there's no fucking excuse anymore. There isn't. We now live in the year freaking 2020X, and then it'll be 2030X, and it's like we're not in the 1800s anymore. It's over. It's over. Okay, give up on the, oh, but this is how it worked 1,000 years ago, or even 50 or 60 years ago. I'm like, it's different. You know, I lived through the 80s where my first computer was a friggin' Apple II Plus.
Mm.
It had 64K of RAM. 64K of RAM. It's just unfathomable for people to think about that now, right? They'll just be like, that doesn't even make any sense. I'm like, yeah, but it happened. That's where it was. And it was only 30, 40, 50 years ago. So when you think about the geometric growth that society has made with digital interconnectedness, it behooves us. It behooves us. It's important for all of us to recognize that we're becoming computers ourselves. You are a computer. Without your laptop, without your phone, without your interconnectivity, without your email, who are you? What are you? What do you do with your life without it? And some people would be like, well, I make bread, so I'm fine, and I bake, and I this, I that, and the other. I'm like, but there's some people who their entire lives are completely devoted to the computer. If you take away all digital stuff, if we had a digital blackout that I could, snap my fingers or press a button and make it all go away, or go, let's say it was a giant global EMP that I could do, an electromagnetic pulse, and it was permanent, let's just say. Uh, I can only imagine how so many people would be like, what do I do? Like, my whole life is, I don't know what do I do without this digital stuff that I've been using every day for 8 hours straight, and so on and so forth. So I think it's just super important, and it's just not being taken seriously in the sense that, they're like, oh, open AI, so they're not really open, and it's not really AI. They're more like closed algorithmic piracy. What do we care? And I'm like, you are not being careful, mankind, humanity, and you are missing it. You're missing the point. Like, is this really what your life is going to be about? This is what you want? You want it to be that what we're all going to be doing is fighting back against this weird algorithmic piracy that we created ourselves? Or do you want it where we actually have a really awesome society where, like, you know what I mean, Harvey, right? You've seen those movies where they show not a dystopian uh, world that the future has become, which, that's what a lot of movies do, right? Everything's dystopian. Terminator 2, everybody's gonna die. Oh no. Great film, but at the same time, then there's the utopian ones, maybe a little bit more like Star Trek, like Gene Roddenberry was trying to, be like, we do not use money anymore. Number one, it's 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 just, which direction would you rather go? Would you rather have it where we let the computer code control us, or where we're like, I think it's probably more important that we use it as a tool, just like a hammer doesn't build the house itself, and we don't let it, like, and it wouldn't do that. But in a way, now the hammer is building the house itself, and it's dictating how the hell we're going to build houses from the future, in the future. I don't know about you, Harvey, but that doesn't sound like no place I want to be.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, I mean, do you kind of plan to campaign ever against these sort of companies? I mean, you've already joined the Facebook group, let's say, Artists Against AI, where I found you.
Mhm.
Um, do you or any artists or writers or creatives that you know take any like form of action apart from, including like joining these groups or speaking out online, campaigning?
There's a link that I placed on my website, which people can visit. And my website, again,
I
whether or
think I
not you include
saw
this,
that.
is
I saw
diamond-dragons.com.
that.
Um, it's under the more page, and people can kind of click. It's near
Yeah.
the whole like about the artist, about the creator, etc. So that's the limit that I have, Harvey. As again, kind of coming back to what we first when we first started talking just now, is as one of 8 billion people on this planet, I have very little reach, and I actually don't have any real influence or power or uh, 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 followers or whatever. I have like zero, and I'm being honest about that. And I'm not trying to say, oh, boo-hoo me. I mean, I'm just saying is I am not Tom Cruise and Gwyneth Paltrow and Harrison Ford and all these whoever. I'm not Tom Hardy or even I don't know, famous, Taylor Swift or something. Like I don't have these kinds of influences. So by me saying something, it would affect 2 people, 3, 6, 12, maybe something, and that's fine. But like I don't want to jump into a swimming pool where, by the time I'm done splashing around or whatever, I get out and I go like, well, there's 3 hours I'll never get back. I mean, it's like there's only so much that I can do, and then I get off of it and I get back to doing this. I'm for to transition here. I'm working on Diamond Dragons 4. So far too with Diamond Dragons 1 through 3, I've now outlined, written, edited, published 420,000 words or so, and 250 plus illustrations. And that will just increase with 4. I want to say book 4 is up to almost 150,000 words at this point. It's going to be longer of one of my whole series, which makes sense. It's a pretty big deal what's happening in it to the characters and the storytelling. And I think I have about 70 illustrations that I've crafted up already. And so by the time I'm done with the whole series, which is about 6 books, um, and screenplays to a certain extent, because actually Diamond Dragons 1 began as a screenplay, my own. But anyway, uh, it'll be getting close to 1 million words. Not quite. It'll probably be more like 800 some thousand words, and probably easily 500 plus illustrations, which is great. That's some storytelling. That's some world building going on right there. But that's what my focus is, Harvey, and I want to complete that job. And I find it to be one of the best stories I've ever read, even myself. And that sounds weird because you'd be like, you're the author. You can just say that. I'm like, well, I'm trying to put it to you this way. It's like, I've been involved in theater and performance and film for 30 plus years. I've enjoyed, you know, Terminator and Dances with Wolves and Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost. Well, that's the same thing, but Star Wars and The Matrix, Harry Potter to some extent. You know what I mean? So I feel like I understand what storytelling is and how powerful it can be. So I'm doing my best with my storytelling to tell a story, and there's a lot of cool thematic underpinnings in the books. I wouldn't exactly say that they relate to AI, but I, if people read them, they might find that there are some things, parallels going on where they're like, wow, this makes me appreciate X, Y, and Z. Even though this story is about dragons and their planet and their thing and whatever's going on with them, it might make people step back and reflect. Reflection is one of the most important concepts in my series of books, but it might have them step back and reflect and be like, wow, I never really thought of that way. It's interesting how that applies to my world and my whatever friends and family and so on. So Harvey, I can only do so much, and it's plausible if someone one day were to say, hey Matthew, we're going to give you 250,000 followers and they're all going to learn from you or something. I'll be like, that's great. I mean, maybe that would be a good idea, but maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe I wouldn't be a good leader in that way. But if people ask my opinion, you just got it, Harvey. I mean, you just got it. I think there should be a global committee going on. I think that it shouldn't really be called artificial intelligence. It should be called algorithmic piracy, at least this iteration of it,
Yeah.
because it's different. It's not that artificial intelligence itself is bad and wrong. That doesn't really make any sense. It's a little too broad. That'd be like saying, guns are bad. Guns bad. I'd be like, kind of, but not. You're far too simple, sir.
Mhm.
You would say it'd be like saying computers bad. I'd be like, maybe not. Cell phones bad. You'd be like, come on. I mean, like, there is some plausible positivity that can come from all of these things. Definitely artificial intelligence, but
Mm.
algorithmic piracy is not one of them, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And just one more thing. So, do you fear about, or have your own like, personal fears about algorithmic piracy, for your books in the future, and what kind of steps do you think you could potentially take to shield yourself from algorithmic piracy?
Well, one, no fear, because, or I shouldn't even say it that way. I'll put it this way. There's a tagline to my third book. Yeah, courage is tempered by equivalent mastery over fear. So, for the amount of fear that you might have about anything, you will need to match it with equivalent courage.
Mhm.
In a way, here's a way of relating it, because some people say, well, what the hell does that mean? That doesn't make no sense. I'm like, there's actually an old John Wayne line, and I don't think he even wrote it. It was in just some Western he was in, and it was, uh, he's on the horse, and there was a guy, a young kid, and he's afraid they're going to war, right? And he says, hey, courage is being scared, but saddling up anyway. Yeah, that kind of thing or whatever, I think. But the line is in there
Yeah.
somewhere. And it's been said by other people better than me, But the point is, so, I mean, do I have fear? It's like kind of yes. That's why I say no fear. It's more like I do have fear, but instead of me being like, oh, what do I do? I'll just quit. I hate life. It's terrible, and I don't like it. And computers. I'm like, well, what good is that gonna do? What are you gonna do? Just sit around? You might as well do your work and continue moving forward. And the last thing I'll say about this is that also, what's super hyper important that people really, really, really need to consider in their own lives is what you can control and what you cannot. And what I mean by that isn't like just give up and don't try, but if it's like, can you control the war in Ukraine and Russia and the whole Gaza Strip thing and Israel? And are you in control of that? And they'll be like, no, I'm not. I'm like, then there's really no way that you should be taking the onus and placing it on yourself and taking 100% of it, because you can't do that. You're not going to do that. So what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Why are you going to do that? Now, if someone said, "What does that mean? Do nothing?" I'm like, I didn't say do nothing. I'm just saying is don't try to take 100% of the burden when it is not your 100% burden. Now, your own life and what you do with it, that's different. Like if someone were to say, "Well, Matthew, who are you going to blame if your books don't get finished?" I'm like, well, I guess that would be me now, wouldn't it? Right? Like I'm not gonna blame someone else for it. But if someone says, "Well, who are you gonna blame if your books don't get read?" I'm like, that's not in my control. Like I'm not a, what do I look like? A professional marketer? What am I, Hollywood? What am I, uh, I don't know, Warren Buffett with endless stacks of cash and stuff? Like, I mean, you can only do so much.
You're really articulate and engaging with the
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I mean, part of that, just so you know, again, comes from that 30 plus years of background,
yeah.
is that, part of being a storyteller is understanding how to engage people, how to make what it is that you're saying interesting, and at the same time, say something that means something, right? Don't just talk to talk, educate people. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like 2 plus 2 equals 4. I'm just saying educate people in a way that makes them think, makes them reflect about their life. Because you only have so many years on this earth to do whatever it is that you want to do, or hope to do, or feel that you were meant to do by the heavens, or whatever you feel. I suggest people get going and get working on the things they want to do. Because at a certain point, they're going to be too old for it, or maybe their life's going to be cut short. You don't know. It happens all the time. We see young people, they're like, oh, a terrible thing happened. This young person was hit by a bus. It's like, how old are they? 16. And you're like, oh, damn, man, like what? What happened? So you don't know. So it's like important for people to do the work and make things happen. And that's all I'm doing. That's all I've been doing for 30 years is I accomplish my objectives. And that's all I can do. If I had hundreds of thousands of people behind me in some way, I actually don't know what I would do with that. I'd have to think about it because I never have been in that position. But I feel like I would certainly be attempting to do something far more responsible with it than this insanity with this Chat GPT thing. Like, I almost, I kind of want to talk to all those CEOs and just be like, slap, 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 and whatever possessed you. Like, whatever possessed you. Were you even thinking before you decided to do all this stuff? And I personally feel like the answer should be they probably were not. They were thinking about profit and how exciting it would be, and oh my God, it's going to change the world. It's like, yeah, it's going to change the world, all right, but maybe not all for the better, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the real key, is that I'm sure that we all thought, hey, the more computer stuff, the better. And that's kind of dangerous. That's kind of like, again, the more bullets and guns we make, the better, right? I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting and well said. I think that's basically everything. I've got a lot of content to use there because I've got your opinion, and it's yeah,
Yeah,
engaging.
feel free to comb through it as much as you want. And if you need clarification, you can always email me and then I can type something if you're like, can you specify more about this strange thing you mentioned about blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, sure, why not? But
Okay.
yeah, like, as you can imagine, Harvey, there is so much to be said about this topic. And part of it is because it's so enormously more grandiose and far-reaching than any human brain can handle. Like, even if you and I collectively were the most genius human beings on this planet, we would still not have the comprehension to really like be able to see that bigger picture of what the ramifications are of this kind of global uh, pandemic is kind of what I want to call it. I mean, it's an electronic pandemic, if you will, but I mean, we just don't have it. I mean, right? Even the people who make it, Harvey, right? They say, look, we don't know why the algorithm is generating this response. They don't even know why that if you ask it very certain questions, sometimes it just comes up with gobbledygook. It'll just be like 20,000.913445, and you're like, what just happened? It went completely psychotic on us. And if you ask the creators, quote unquote, of ChatGPT or whatever, they'll say, we don't know, because at this point the code is so ginormously complex and the code is so bananas. There is no one person on this planet, let alone in our company, who knows what's going on. And I don't know about you, Harvey, but it's like that's kind of one of those scary things. Like, I guess that's how it works with cell phones. Like, I bet you can't find a single person, Harvey, on the planet who collectively could take a whole cell phone apart and identify and show you absolutely every circuit and every microchip on it and every transistor and say, I know exactly how every single bit of it works. I doubt it. And it's kind of scary, because then what happens if that technology gets lost? Who's gonna do it again? You know? So I just think it's unfortunately really complicated. We make all these devices that we don't understand, and that can destroy us.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much.